My father beat me, and he beat me, and he beat me, and then he threw me in the bathroom and he closed the door. Beat me with a belt buckle and a switch.
He would take guns and put them to our heads and pull the trigger all the time until the day I left home. He would take matches and burn our toes, and he would laugh, and we couldn't do anything.
You can't say no because he beats you. You can't.
Yeah.
And it's bad because he would always tell me that I was nothing and I never will be nothing.
Yeah.
And I always remember these words.
For decades, the world has heard countless stories about the death of Michael Jackson. We've seen the headlines, the trials, the documentaries, and the endless speculation. But behind all the noise, there's one voice that has always stood apart. A voice from inside the Jackson family itself. While many have spoken about that tragic day in June 2009, only those closest to Michael truly understood the dark web of people surrounding him in his final years. And among them, one person has been the most willing to say what others only dared to whisper. His sister, Toya Jackson. In her book Starting Over, and in several raw interviews, Toya made a painful and shocking claim. Michael had told her more than once that he believed he would be murdered, not by a stranger, but by the very people around him who wanted control of his music catalog and his estate. She didn't just point fingers at one man, she described a much larger, more dangerous picture. Today, we're going to look at the 7 names most frequently connected to those accusations, not as proven facts, but as the disturbing portrait that Toya and others close to Michael have painted over the years. Some of these names may surprise you, others may confirm what you've long suspected, but one thing is certain. Once you hear what Toya revealed, Michael Jackson's final days may never feel the same. Only the ache of what could have been prevented. If you're ready to go deeper into the untold stories behind the King of Pop, make sure you're subscribed and have the notification bell on, because we're just getting started. Before we start naming anyone, before we dive into the list of people Toya Jackson has pointed to, we need to go back to where it all began for her. Because these accusations didn't come from nowhere. They came from years of private conversations, quiet warnings, and a bond between two siblings who understood each other better than most people realized. On the morning of June 25, 2009, Toya Jackson was at home when the phone rang. What she heard on the other end would change her life forever. Michael, her younger brother, the boy she had grown up with, the man she had always felt closest to in the family, was gone. In the chaos and grief that followed, one question kept repeating in her mind. Who killed Michael? Not how did he die, but who? According to Toya, that question wasn't born in that moment. It had been planted years earlier, in quiet conversations between her and Michael, conversations most of the world never got to hear. Toya has said that Michael would often speak to her about the people around him, not in loud, dramatic ways, but in private, almost tired tones. He would tell her that he felt trapped, that he was surrounded by people who smiled to his face but were only interested in what they could take from him. And more than once, he told her something that would later haunt her. Toya, I'm going to be murdered for my music publishing catalog and my estate. He didn't say it once. According to her, he said it repeatedly, sometimes with fear in his voice, sometimes with a strange kind of acceptance, as if he had already accepted that the people closest to him might be the ones who would eventually turn on him. Michael had always been protective of Toya. Years earlier, when she was married to her former manager Jack Gordon, a relationship that would later turn violent and abusive, Michael had warned her. He told her that Gordon was dangerous, that she needed to get away from him before something terrible happened. Toya didn't fully listen at the time, but later, after she escaped that marriage and almost died from the beatings she endured, she understood why Michael had been so worried. That experience changed her. After surviving years of manipulation and physical abuse at the hands of her ex-husband, Toya became extremely sensitive to the idea of people using others for their own gain. She knew what it felt like to be controlled. She knew what it felt like to have people around you who claimed to care, but were really only interested in money and power. And because of that, when Michael started expressing his own fears about the people surrounding him, she didn't dismiss them. She listened. In the years leading up to his death, Toya has described Michael as being under immense pressure. He was preparing for what was supposed to be his big comeback, the This Is It concerts in London. But behind the scenes, she believed he was struggling, not just with his health, but with the feeling that he was being used, that the people managing his career and his finances were pushing him too hard, while secretly planning for what would happen if he couldn't continue. When news of Michael's death broke, LaToya didn't just grieve. She started connecting the dots. And one of the first things she concluded was that Dr. Conrad Murray, the doctor who was with Michael in his final hours, was not the mastermind. In her mind, he was what she later called a fall guy, someone placed in that position to take the blame, while the real people behind the scenes walked away untouched. She has said this publicly multiple times, that Michael's death felt too convenient for too many people, that the timing, the pressure he was under, and the enormous value of his music catalog made her believe that his death was not an accident. It was something planned. Now, it's important to be clear here. These are LaToya Jackson's beliefs. These are the things she has said in her book Starting Over, in interviews, and in public statements over the years. She has never presented them as court-proven facts, but she has spoken about them with a lot of pain and conviction. And because of her own past, because she herself had been manipulated, controlled, and nearly killed by someone she once trusted, her words carry a certain weight for many people who listen to her. She wasn't just a sister reacting emotionally. She was someone who had lived through betrayal at the highest level. And when she looked at what happened to Michael, she saw patterns that were painfully familiar to her. Michael had always been the most sensitive of the Jackson siblings. He carried the weight of the family's success on his shoulders from a very young age. He had been hurt by the industry. He had been hurt by people he trusted. And in his final years, according to LaToya, he was more isolated than ever. She has described how, even as an adult, Michael would still reach out to her. Not always for big conversations, but for quiet moments where he could express what he was really feeling. And one of the things he kept coming back to was fear. Fear that the people around him were not there to protect him, but to take from him. Whether you believe LaToya's version of events or not, one thing is hard to deny. She was one of the very few people in the Jackson family who was willing to say these things out loud. While others stayed silent or focused only on the official story, LaToya chose to speak about the darker possibilities. And in doing so, she opened a door that many people are still walking through today. A door that leads to questions about power, money, control, and the people who were closest to Michael Jackson in the final chapter of his life. Dr. Conrad Murray, the fall guy? LaToya Jackson called him the fall guy. But was Dr. Conrad Murray really working alone? Or was he just the man left holding the smoking gun? On the night of June 25, 2009, inside a rented mansion in Holmby Hills, Los Angeles, Dr. Conrad Murray, Michael Jackson's personal physician, was the only doctor in the house. According to court records and witness testimony, Murray had been giving Michael propofol, a powerful surgical anesthetic, almost every night for weeks to help him sleep. On that final night, after administering a combination of propofol and benzodiazepines, Murray stepped out of the bedroom for a short time. When he returned, Michael was no longer breathing. What happened next shocked many people. Instead of immediately calling 911, Murray reportedly made phone calls, including one to his lawyer, before emergency services were contacted. By the time paramedics arrived, Michael had been in cardiac arrest for a significant amount of time. Despite their efforts, he was pronounced dead at UCLA Medical Center later that morning. In November 2011, a jury found Dr. Conrad Murray guilty of involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison and served roughly 2 years before being released. The court determined that Murray's actions, using propofol in a home setting without proper monitoring equipment and failing to respond quickly enough, directly led to Michael's death. But LaToya Jackson has always seen this differently. In her book Starting Over and in multiple interviews, she has repeatedly said that Murray was not the mastermind. She called him a fall guy, someone placed in that position to take the blame while the real people behind the scenes remained protected. According to LaToya, Michael had been under enormous pressure from the people managing his comeback tour. She believed his death was too convenient for too many powerful interests, especially those who stood to gain control of his extremely valuable music catalog. What made LaToya's reaction even more intense was her own personal history. Having survived years of manipulation and abuse at the hands of her ex-husband, she was deeply distrustful of people who claimed to be helping Michael while secretly benefiting from his vulnerability. When she looked at Murray, a cardiologist, not a sleep specialist, administering a hospital-grade anesthetic in a bedroom, she saw someone who should never have been in that position in the first place. She has questioned how Murray was hired, who was really paying him, and why he was allowed to make medical decisions with so little oversight. While she has never presented hard evidence of a larger conspiracy in court, she has maintained that Murray alone could not have been responsible for everything that led to that night. It's important to note that these are LaToya Jackson's beliefs and accusations. Legally, Dr. Conrad Murray remains the only person convicted in connection with Michael Jackson's death. The idea that he was merely a fall guy for bigger forces has never been proven in a court of law. Still, for LaToya, the question has never gone away. If Murray was just following orders, then whose orders was he really following? Randy Phillips, the man who wanted 50 shows in London, no matter what it cost Michael. In early 2009, Randy Phillips, the CEO of AEG Live, was under enormous pressure. His company had just signed a deal with Michael Jackson for what was supposed to be the biggest comeback tour in music history, 50 sold-out shows at the O2 Arena in London. The numbers were staggering. If the tour went ahead as planned, it could generate hundreds of millions of dollars. But there was a problem. Michael Jackson was not well. According to emails and internal documents that later surfaced during a lawsuit, AEG executives, including Randy Phillips, were receiving regular updates about Michael's health. He was missing rehearsals. He was losing weight rapidly. Some days, he seemed disoriented. Yet the show had to go on. In one particularly revealing email from March 2009, Phillips wrote to his team about Michael's condition. He expressed concern, but also made it clear that the tour could not be delayed. The financial stakes were too high. Canceling or even postponing shows would mean massive losses, not just for AEG, but for everyone involved in the production. LaToya Jackson has long believed that this kind of pressure played a direct role in what happened to her brother. She has said that Michael was being pushed beyond his physical and mental limits. In her view, the people around him, including those at AEG, were more focused on the money than on Michael's well-being. The situation came to a head in the weeks before Michael's death. On June 20th, 2009, just 5 days before he passed, Michael had a meeting with the production team. According to those who were present, he looked exhausted. He struggled to remember choreography and seemed overwhelmed. Yet the rehearsals continued. Randy Phillips and his team were determined to keep the timeline on track. After Michael's death, Catherine Jackson filed a wrongful death lawsuit against AEG Live. The family accused the company of negligently hiring Dr. Conrad Murray and of exerting dangerous pressure on Michael to perform, despite clear signs that his health was failing. During the trial, many internal emails were made public. Some of them showed AEG executives discussing Michael's health in cold, businesslike terms, often focusing on how his condition might affect ticket sales rather than his actual well-being. In one email, an AEG executive reportedly asked whether Michael was healthy enough to perform, not out of concern for his life, but out of concern for the show's success. The jury ultimately ruled in favor of AEG in 2013. They found that while AEG did hire Dr. Murray, he was not unfit for the job they hired him to do. The company was not held legally responsible for Michael's death. Still, for LaToya and many others, the emails painted a disturbing picture. They showed a company that seemed willing to push Michael to his limits in order to protect their investment. Whether or not this pressure directly caused his death remains unproven in court. But it raised serious questions about how far entertainment companies are willing to go when billions of dollars are on the line. Randy Phillips never faced criminal charges. He continued working in the industry for years after Michael's death. But the shadow of those final weeks in 2009 has followed him ever since. Because according to LaToya Jackson, the man who wanted 50 shows in London got what he wanted, even if it cost Michael Jackson everything. Paul Gongaware, AEG executive, the man who was in the room when decisions about Michael's health were being made. If Randy Phillips was the face of AEG Live during the This Is It tour, then Paul Gongaware was the man working behind the scenes. As one of the top executives overseeing the production, Gongaware had direct daily contact with both Michael Jackson and Dr. Conrad Murray in the final months of Michael's life. Gongaware was not new to Michael. He had worked with him years earlier during the Bad tour in the late 1980s. He knew Michael's habits, his personality, and his physical limits better than most people at AEG. That made what happened in 2009 even more troubling for those who later looked back at the timeline. According to court documents and witness testimony from the AEG lawsuit, Paul Gongaware was one of the people who communicated most frequently with Dr. Murray. He was also aware that Michael was struggling with rehearsals. On multiple occasions, Michael failed to show up or left early because he wasn't feeling well. Instead of slowing things down, Gongaware and the production team kept pushing forward. One particularly striking moment came in mid-June 2009. During a production meeting, Gongaware reportedly received updates that Michael was in poor condition. He was losing weight, appeared weak, and was having difficulty remembering dance routines. Yet the decision was made to continue full-speed rehearsals. The show's opening date in London was approaching fast, and millions of dollars had already been spent on production. Toya Jackson has pointed to people like Gongaware as part of the problem. In her mind, these were the individuals who were close enough to see what was really happening to Michael, but chose to prioritize the tour over his health. She has described the final weeks of Michael's life as a period where he was surrounded by people who saw him as a product first and a human being second. What makes Gongaware's role especially significant is his direct involvement with Dr. Murray. Emails and phone records showed that Gongaware was in regular contact with the doctor. Murray had been hired through AEG's recommendation, and Gongaware was one of the main points of contact. According to some testimony, Murray even reached out to Gongaware when he had concerns about Michael's condition. Yet despite these warning signs, the rehearsals continued. After Michael's death, Paul Gongaware testified during the wrongful death lawsuit brought by Katherine Jackson. He maintained that he and AEG had acted responsibly and that they had no reason to believe Michael was in immediate danger. The jury ultimately agreed with AEG's position, and the company was not held liable. Still, the questions remain. How much did Paul Gongaware really know about Michael's health in those final weeks? And if he knew Michael was deteriorating, why wasn't more done to protect him? Toya Jackson has long believed that the answers to these questions point to something much darker than simple negligence. She has suggested that Michael was being worked to the point of collapse, not because anyone wanted him to die, but because the show was simply too important and too profitable to stop. Whether Gongaware and others at AEG were guilty of anything beyond aggressive business practices has never been proven in court. But for those who look closely at the timeline, one thing is difficult to ignore. Paul Gongaware was in the room when critical decisions about Michael's health were being made. And somehow, the show kept moving forward, right up until the very end. Joe Jackson, the father who created the pressure. Long before the bright lights of the world stage, there was a small house in Gary, Indiana. And inside that house, according to Toya Jackson, fear was a constant presence. She has described how their father, Joe Jackson, ruled the family with an iron fist. Rehearsals were not optional, they were mandatory. If any of the children made a mistake, Joe didn't hesitate to use his belt. Toya has spoken about nights when Michael would come to her room crying after being beaten. He was just a little boy, but he was already being told that failure was not an option. Michael himself later admitted in his 1993 interview with Oprah that his father would sit in a chair with a belt in his hand during rehearsals. If anyone messed up the steps, Joe would tear you up. Toya has said that even as an adult, Michael still carried the emotional scars from those years. The pressure to be perfect, the fear of disappointing his father, and the belief that love had to be earned through success, these things never truly left him. What makes this even more painful, according to Toya, is that Joe Jackson didn't just shape Michael's work ethic, he shaped his deepest insecurities. Michael grew up believing that if he wasn't the best, if he wasn't successful, he was worthless. That kind of psychological pressure, Toya has said, can break a person from the inside out. Even decades later, when Michael was already the most famous person on the planet, Toya noticed that he still reacted strongly whenever their father was mentioned. She has described moments when she would bring up Joe during conversations, and Michael's entire mood would shift. The little boy who was once terrified of his father was still there, buried beneath the fame and the fortune. After Michael's death, Joe Jackson filed lawsuits against both Dr. Conrad Murray and AEG Live. He demanded answers, but for Toya, those lawsuits came too late. She has often wondered whether the damage had already been done many years earlier, in that small house in Gary, where a young Michael Jackson first learned that the world could be a cruel and unforgiving place. LaToya has cried while speaking about this part of their childhood, not out of anger, but out of sadness for the little brother she couldn't protect. She believes that the relentless pressure Joe placed on Michael from such a young age created deep emotional wounds that never fully healed, wounds that may have made him more vulnerable to the people who later surrounded him in his final years. While Joe Jackson has always maintained that he was simply trying to give his children a better life, LaToya sees things differently. She believes the cost of that better life was far higher than anyone could have imagined, and that Michael paid the heaviest price of all. It remains one of the most painful and unresolved chapters in the Jackson family story. Tommy Mottola, the Sony connection. The man Michael once called the devil in public. On July 6, 2002, at a press conference in New York, Michael Jackson did something few people expected. Standing in front of cameras and reporters, he looked directly into the lens and called his former Sony music executive, Tommy Mottola, the devil. The room went silent. Michael accused Mottola and Sony of trying to take control of his music catalog. He claimed they were treating him unfairly in contract negotiations and were more interested in owning his masters than supporting his art. For many watching, it was a shocking moment, but according to LaToya Jackson, it was also a moment of truth, one that revealed just how deep Michael's distrust of the music industry had become. LaToya has said that in the years leading up to his death, Michael became increasingly paranoid about the people who controlled his music rights. The most valuable asset he owned was his stake in the Sony/TV catalog, which included the publishing rights to hundreds of Beatles songs. It was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and LaToya believes that this catalog made Michael a target. She has claimed that Michael told her he feared for his life because of it, that certain powerful people wanted him out of the way so they could regain full control of the catalog. While these claims have never been proven in court, LaToya has repeated them consistently over the years, sometimes with tears in her eyes. What makes this chapter especially dark is the timing. Michael's conflict with Sony became very public in 2002. By 2009, he was preparing for what many saw as a final attempt to regain financial stability through the This Is It tour. LaToya has suggested that the same forces Michael had publicly fought against years earlier may have still been working against him behind the scenes. She has described how Michael felt trapped in a system that valued his music more than his life. The catalog he helped build had become both his greatest achievement and, in her view, his greatest danger. According to LaToya, Michael knew that as long as he was alive and in control of his share, certain people would never truly rest. Of all the names LaToya has mentioned over the years, Tommy Mottola and the Sony connection represent the most conspiracy-laden part of her narrative. She has never presented concrete evidence that anyone at Sony was involved in Michael's death, but she has made it clear that she believes the fight over his music catalog was not just about money. It was about power, control, and possibly something much more sinister. Whether these fears were justified or not, one thing is certain. By the time Michael stood on that stage in 2002 and called Tommy Mottola the devil, he had already come to believe that the people he once trusted in the music industry had become his enemies. And according to his sister, that belief never left him. Các cố vấn tài chính và quản lý kinh doanh. The people who were supposed to protect his money, but allegedly helped destroy him. By the late 2000s, Michael Jackson was reportedly over $400 million in debt. His Neverland Ranch faced foreclosure, and many of his investments had collapsed. According to LaToya Jackson, a group of financial advisors and managers, the very people meant to protect his wealth, made decisions that pushed him deeper into crisis. She has claimed these advisors benefited from large fees, while Michael's financial situation worsened. By 2008, he was nearly broke. LaToya believes this desperation forced him to agree to the This Is It tour in 2009, even though he was physically and emotionally exhausted. In her view, the people managing his money didn't just fail to help him, they helped create the very pressure that eventually broke him. While no criminal charges were ever filed against his financial team, LaToya sees them as part of the shadowy entourage that surrounded her brother in his final years, people who smiled to his face while quietly benefiting from his downfall. Dr. Arnold Klein, the prescription connection, the doctor who gave Michael the pills long before Murray arrived. For over 20 years, Dr. Arnold Klein, a Beverly Hills dermatologist, had been treating Michael Jackson. According to medical records and later reports, Klein prescribed him large amounts of powerful painkillers and sedatives, including Demerol and anti-anxiety medications. Toya Jackson has said that this long-term use of strong prescription drugs created a dangerous dependency. What began as treatment for old performance injuries gradually turned into something much more serious. By 2009, Michael was struggling with severe insomnia and normal medications no longer worked. Toya believes doctors like Klein played a role in making Michael reliant on increasingly powerful substances. She has described watching her brother become more withdrawn as his need for medication grew. In her mind, this long-running dependency helped pave the way for what eventually happened with Dr. Conrad Murray and propofol. Dr. Klein was never charged in connection with Michael's death. However, for Toya, his name remains part of a painful pattern, the story of how the people closest to Michael, including some of his doctors, may have contributed to his downfall over many years, one prescription at a time. Over the past few chapters, we've explored the 7 names most often connected to the accusations surrounding Michael Jackson's death, according to his sister Toya and others close to him. We looked at Dr. Conrad Murray, the only person legally convicted in this case. We examined Randy Phillips and Paul Gongaware from AEG Live, who pushed for the This Is It tour despite warning signs about Michael's health. We talked about Joe Jackson and the deep psychological pressure Michael carried since childhood. We discussed Tommy Mottola and the bitter battle over Michael's music catalog. And we looked at his financial advisors and Dr. Arnold Klein, people who, according to Toya, played a role in the difficult situation Michael found himself in during his final years. Legally, only one person was held responsible, Dr. Conrad Murray, who was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and served time in prison. But here's the question I want to leave you with. Do you believe that only one man should carry the blame? Or do you think the others we discussed today also share responsibility for what happened to Michael Jackson? Was it just medical negligence? Or was it something bigger, a combination of pressure, greed, control, and the people who surrounded him in his final years? I'd really like to know what you think. Drop your honest opinion in the comments below. Do you agree with Toya's view, or do you see it differently? Let's discuss it respectfully. And if this story made you think, or if you want to hear more untold stories about legends like Michael Jackson, make sure you're subscribed to Black Legend and turn on the notification bell. We go deep into the stories the mainstream often leaves behind. Thank you for watching until the end.